My father lived in Galicia, which then was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He identified strongly with German culture, and even though he had limited education, he studied in the village school in the little village where he grew up. He had ambitions to go to the university, and he used to tell me that he could not go because they were afraid he would write on Saturday. But my father was very cosmopolitan. He often traveled to Vienna and Budapest, which were the twin capitals of the empire. My mother came from Warsaw. She was from a lower social class than my father, and they made a love marriage. He heard her singing in the streets with her friends in Boston, and he also was living in this enclave, immigrant enclave in Boston. At that point, my mother was called a sick girl. She was weak, and people weren't supposed to marry sick girls because maybe they wouldn't have children. But it was a love match, and they were happy together. And she died of cancer when she was 41. They had one child, me. I admired my father very, very much because I figured that he had very strong values. He was not a religious man. He was culturally Jewish. I tried to be more observant than my parents, but didn't take, I'm afraid. I am a little more observant, in addition to being very culturally aware. I think in some ways I'm like my parents. My mother died when I was 6 years old. My father remarried a woman who hadn't been married before. They didn't have children. She was a little more Americanized, but I felt my father, who had drunk of European wines culturally, was much more sophisticated than she, and I gave her a hard time, for which I hope I will be forgiven. And we lived in Dorchester and Mattapan, which were parts of Boston. Eventually we made it to Brookline, which was another step up economically. Not really. Mostly we lived in areas which were Jewish enclaves. I went to a high school which was called the Girls Latin School, which was a public college prep school. And it was, I was advised that I didn't really have it by the teachers, that I didn't have it to succeed there. And I figured, the heck with it, I'm going to try. I was childish, I was very immature, but I did love studying and I loved learning very much, and they didn't really pick up on it. And then I got to go on what were streetcars to school, which gave me some independence, and I did go out of the enclave. Our teachers were all Roman Catholic, and I don't think they were anti-Semitic, but they saw things through their prism. And Boston was a heavily Catholic city. It was quite interesting because in terms of working together, Jews and Protestants worked together, even though politically it was controlled politically by Catholics, Irish Catholics. Later on, I came to learn about Irish history and Irish literature, and this helped me to understand their point of view. A lot of boys from the enclave where I lived got scholarships and went to Harvard. this was the second wave of immigrant Jewish boys, or the children of immigrants who went to Harvard. And some rather famous people eventually went to Harvard because they were so bright. And of course, in the 20s, they had a quota at Harvard for Jews, because the president thought that there were too many Jews coming to Harvard. It would dilute the essence of Harvard. I went to Simmons College. I got a scholarship. I met Grandpa Jerry at a dance at the Hillel Club. All the girls a lot of us went to girls' school. Simmons at that time was a girls' school. And we would go every weekend to the Harvard Hillel, and we'd see who we could meet. And he came up to me and said he said, "You have a familiar face." I don't know if you've heard him say that. He still says it sometimes. I think I had 4 children in 6 years.
Wow.
Well, I wanted children very badly, and so did Grandpa Jerry. I mean, I had a kosher home. We belonged to a synagogue in Schenectady. We've always belonged to a synagogue wherever we lived. I wanted to have an intellectual life, and that has stood me in good stead. Whatever disappointments I've had a lot of joy through learning. I guess I'm not conventional. I'm not a conventional member of the Jewish community. However, I do support as much as I can Jewish charities, because I feel that is my obligation.